When the Russian consulate in Rabat received a phone call on December 22, 2024, the employee on the other end of the line initially thought it was a prank. A young woman with a strong accent and a stutter claimed that she had escaped from slavery in the mountains of Morocco, where she had spent 18 months with two friends. One of them is dead. The other is still there, with a baby in her arms. But when the employee heard sobs on the phone and saw the emaciated girl who burst into the consulate building half an hour later, he realized it was no joke. It was a nightmare that began with a routine Instagram post a year and a half ago. This story makes you think about how easily modern technology can turn trust into a trap, and dreams of spiritual enlightenment into a path to real hell. If you think this only happens in movies, this story will prove otherwise. Stay tuned until the end, because the outcome of this case not only shocked Russian society, but also forced law enforcement agencies in two countries to rethink their methods of working with missing tourists. And be sure to write in the comments what you think. Could these girls have recognized the danger in advance? Or were the scammers so professional that they didn't stand a chance? It all started innocently enough. In the spring of 2023, three friends from Moscow, Marina, Olesia, and Christina, were looking for a way to escape the hustle and bustle and stress of the city. They were 23, 25, and 27 years old, respectively. All three worked in IT, spent 10 to 12 hours a day at their computers, and dreamed of something authentic, real, far from Moscow traffic jams and office deadlines. Marina, the youngest of the three, had been practicing yoga for 3 years and constantly shared posts with her friends about spiritual practices, meditation, and trips to exotic places. It was Marina who, in early May 2023, stumbled upon an Instagram account called Atlas Spirit Journey. The profile looked professional. Beautiful photos of Moroccan landscapes, Berber villages, sunrises over the Atlas Mountains. The description said that the retreat organizer was a certain Youssef Al-Hakim, a Moroccan with a European education who had studied yoga in India and worked with Russian-speaking tourists. The page had more than 15,000 followers and dozens of rave reviews from women in Russia, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan. Everyone wrote about their unforgettable experiences, the hospitality of Berber families, and how their lives had changed after 2 weeks in the mountains. The retreat cost $800 per person for 2 weeks, including accommodation in a traditional Berber house, meals, daily yoga and meditation classes, and excursions in the surrounding area. For Moscow, this was an acceptable price, cheaper than many Turkish or Egyptian resorts. Marina showed the profile to her friends. Olesia, a 25-year-old programmer who had recently gone through a difficult breakup with her boyfriend, was immediately enthusiastic about the idea. Christina, the oldest and most rational of the group, was hesitant at first, but then agreed as well. They all needed a vacation, and the opportunity to immerse themselves in another culture seemed appealing. They wrote to Youssef in a direct message. He replied quickly, in good Russian with a slight accent. He explained that he had been working with tourists for 5 years, that his family owned a guest house in the village of Imlil in the foothills of the Atlas Mountains, and that the program was tailored to Russian-speaking guests. He sent a contract in Russian, where everything looked official: the details of the Moroccan company, the terms of cancellation, insurance. He asked for a prepayment of $300 per person via international transfer to a card. The girls transferred the money in mid-May, receiving confirmation and e-tickets for entry. On June 21, 2023, in the height of summer, when Moscow was sweltering in the heat, the three friends flew from Sheremetyevo to Marrakesh on a direct flight. Each had a backpack with light clothing, yoga mats, books, and phone chargers. They laughed on the plane, took selfies, and made plans. Marina said that after the retreat, she planned to become a yoga instructor. Olesia hoped to meet interesting people and forget about her ex. Christina just wanted 2 weeks of peace and quiet. When the plane landed at Marrakesh airport around noon on June 21st, they were met by a man in his 40s holding a sign that read, "Atlas Spirit Journey." He introduced himself as Amin, Youssef's driver, and explained that Youssef himself was already waiting for them in the village. The girls got into a worn white Toyota minibus and set off. For the first 2 hours, the road passed through picturesque areas: the red walls of Marrakesh, fields of olive trees, small towns with bustling markets. The girls photographed everything in sight, and Marina live-streamed on her Instagram, showing her followers the Moroccan landscapes. But then, the road changed. The asphalt gave way to dirt. The towns became fewer and farther between, and the surrounding mountains grew taller and more rugged. Amin hardly spoke, answering questions with monosyllables. Mobile communication began to disappear. After 4 hours on the road, Christina became concerned. According to the map, they should have arrived in Imlil, a well-known tourist village at the foot of Jebel Toubkal, Morocco's highest peak. But instead, the minibus turned onto a narrow mountain path, moving further and further away from civilization. When, 6 hours after setting off, the minibus stopped in a small village lost among the rocks, the girls had no connection at all. The village consisted of 24 mud houses scattered across the mountainside. There were no signs, no tourists, only locals in traditional clothing, curiously eyeing the newcomers. Amin led them to a house on the edge of the village, a 2-story adobe building with small windows and a heavy wooden door. Inside, it was dark and cool, smelling of spices and smoke from the hearth. They were greeted by an elderly Berber woman who did not speak a word of Russian. Through Amin, she explained that Youssef was delayed in Marrakesh on business, but would arrive tomorrow morning. The woman showed the girls a room on the 2nd floor, spacious, with 3 mattresses on the floor, a window overlooking the mountains, and minimal furniture. There was no electricity, only kerosene lamps. The toilet was outside, and water came from a well. Amin said that this was the authenticity they had dreamed of, said goodbye, and left. The first 2 days passed relatively calmly. The girls tried to get used to their new surroundings, explored the village, and communicated with the local children using gestures. A Berber woman, whom they nicknamed Grandma, cooked them tagine and couscous and treated them to mint tea. No yoga, no classes, just waiting for Youssef. On the 3rd day, June 24th, as the sun was setting, a man in his mid-30s wearing traditional Berber clothing entered the house. He introduced himself as Youssef and asked the girls for their passports. Marina was the first to be wary. Why did he need their passports if they were already there? Youssef explained that according to Moroccan law, all foreign tourists staying in private homes must be registered with the local police. He would take their documents, drive to the nearest town, take care of everything necessary, and return by evening. It was standard procedure. Christina tried to object, but Youssef insisted that without registration, they could have problems leaving the country. The girls exchanged glances and finally handed him their passports. Youssef took the documents, left the house, and disappeared. He did not return in the evening. He did not return the next day. The girls began to panic. The grandmother pretended not to understand their questions. Attempts to find anyone in the village who spoke English failed. The phones were useless without a signal. On the evening of June 25th, when they were about to leave the house and look for the road to the nearest town, the door opened. 3 men entered, tall, strong Berbers between the ages of 30 and 40. Behind them stood the grandmother with a stony face. The eldest of the men, named Ahmed, spoke in broken English. He said they had bought these girls. They had paid Youssef $15,000. Now they belonged to them. 1 girl for each brother. They would work in the house and in the fields, and if they obeyed, they would not be treated cruelly. If they tried to run away, they would be found and punished. The village was 6 hours away from the nearest town, surrounded by mountains, and the locals all knew each other and would never help strangers. Marina screamed. Olesia rushed to the door, but her younger brother grabbed her by the arm and threw her back to the floor. Christina tried to call for help, but no one responded. Everyone in the village knew about the deal and kept quiet. It wasn't the first purchase of its kind. The brothers took the girls' phones, searched their backpacks, and confiscated everything of value: watches, jewelry, money. Their passports disappeared along with Yusuf. The girls were left with nothing but their clothes and fear. Thus began 18 months of hell. Marina, the youngest and weakest, was given to the youngest brother, Mustafa, who was cruel and quick-tempered. Olesia was taken by the middle brother, Omar, who was quiet, but cold as ice. Christina was taken by Ahmed, the eldest, who considered himself the master of the situation. The girls were divided between different houses, located a few hundred meters apart. They were forbidden to communicate with each other. Every day began before dawn and ended after sunset. Marina worked in the kitchen, carried water from a well 20 minutes away, and washed the clothes of Mustafa's entire family by hand: his mother's, and his 2 younger sisters. She was taught to bake bread in a clay oven, cook tagine, and clean the house. The slightest disobedience was punished with beatings. Mustafa did not consider her a person. She was a thing bought with money. At night, he would come to the room where she was locked up, and she could not resist. Olesia found herself in the fields. Omar owned a small plot of land where he grew barley and olives. From dawn to dusk, she worked under the scorching sun, carrying heavy sacks, digging the ground, and harvesting crops. She had no gloves, and her hands were covered with calluses and cuts. She lost 20 kilograms in the first 3 months. Omar hardly spoke to her, but his silence was worse than Mustafa's screams. He beat her methodically, without emotion, if the work was not done well enough. Christina, as the eldest and most educated, tried to resist. She demanded to see the police, shouted about her rights, and refused to work. Ahmed broke her in a week, first by starving her, not giving her food for 3 days. Then, by beating her with a wooden stick. Then, by threatening to kill her friends if she didn't shut up. Christina gave up. She was forced to look after the livestock, goats and sheep, clean the barn, and milk the animals. She, a programmer with a degree from Moscow State University, who had spent her days writing code, now stood knee-deep in manure. For the first 3 months, the girls tried to come up with an escape plan. Occasionally, they managed to exchange a few words when they were sent to fetch water at the same time. But escape seemed impossible. The village was isolated, and the road to the nearest town went through dangerous mountain passes. They had no maps, no money, no documents. The locals, without exception, supported the brothers. For them, this was the normal order of things. Foreign women, bought with money, did not deserve sympathy. In September 2023, Olesia realized she was pregnant. She had missed 2 periods and was nauseous in the mornings. She tried to hide it from Omar, hoping for a miscarriage, but by October her belly had started to grow. Omar was pleased. The child meant that she was now tied to him forever, that she would not be able to escape. The Moroccan authorities would never allow a foreign woman to take a Berber child out of the country. Olesia fell into depression. She did not want this child, conceived through violence, but she had no choice. Marina also became pregnant in November 2023. Unlike Olesia, her pregnancy was difficult. She began to experience severe pain and bleeding. Mustafa did not call a doctor. What difference did it make whether she survived or not? In December, during a particularly cold night, Marina had a miscarriage. She lost a lot of blood, and her temperature rose. The infection developed rapidly. Mustafa finally brought in a village healer, but it was too late. On December 27, 2023, 6 months after arriving in Morocco, Marina died in a cold room, on a dirty mattress, without medical assistance. She was 23 years old. Mustafa buried her body somewhere in the mountains, without revealing the exact location. No documents, no coffin, no funeral service. To the locals, she was a nobody. Olesia and Christina only learned of their friend's death a week later, when one of the local women accidentally let it slip. They both cried at night, but couldn't even visit the grave. It was a turning point. Olesia stopped resisting altogether and withdrew into herself. Christina, on the contrary, began to plan her escape even more desperately. Olesia's pregnancy continued. By the spring of 2024, she was unable to work in the fields, and Omar transferred her to lighter work in the house. She gave birth in October 2024, in the same house, without a doctor, with the help of the same midwife. The labor lasted 20 hours. Olesia nearly died from blood loss, but the child survived. A boy, dark-haired, crying. Omar named him Yusuf, after the swindler who sold them the girls. Olesia couldn't look at the baby. Every time she picked him up, she saw Omar's face and remembered all those nights of violence. But her maternal instinct took over. She breastfed him and rocked him when he cried. He was her child, even though she hated the circumstances of his conception. Omar was proud of his son and showed him off to the whole village. Olesia became more valuable to him, the mother of his child, not just a slave. Christina took advantage of this. In November 2024, she was able to talk to Olesia alone for the first time in a year and a half. Omar allowed Olesia to take the baby out for a walk, and they met at the well. Christina whispered her plan. In December, the brothers usually go to the market in the city of Azilal to sell their harvest and buy supplies for the winter. Sometimes they take women with them to help carry the purchases. If they manage to get to the city, they will be able to escape. The risk was enormous. If they were caught, the brothers might kill them. But the alternative was to spend the rest of their lives in this village, bear children by rapists, and die, like Marina, without a name or a grave. Olesia hesitated. She now had a child. Christina convinced her that in Russia they would have a chance at a normal life, medical care, and a future for their son. They agreed to act at the first opportunity. The opportunity arose on December 21st, 2024. Ahmed announced that tomorrow they were going to the market, and Christina and Olesia had to go with them. The girls did not sleep the night before the trip. Christina gathered a small bundle of clothes in a hiding place under the floor. Olesia held her sleeping baby to her chest, praying to all the gods she believed in and didn't believe in for their plan to work. On the morning of December 22nd, they got into the same white Toyota minibus that had brought them to the village a year and a half ago. It was a 6-hour drive along mountain roads. The brothers were in a good mood, discussing barley prices. The girls sat in the back, silent, trying not to attract attention. Christina clenched her fists until they hurt. Olesia rocked the baby. Azilal greeted them with noise and bustle. The market was teeming with people, traders, buyers, tourists. The brothers left the minibus in the parking lot and took the girls to the bazaar. Christina looked around, searching for a police station, an administrative building, any official place. But Ahmed held her hand tightly, not letting go. They walked from stall to stall, buying bags of rice, tea, and spices. The girls carried the purchases like obedient slaves. An hour later, when the brothers stopped at a butcher's stall to check the prices, Christina noticed a sign in French, Commissariat de Police. The police station was 2 blocks away. She squeezed Olesia's hand. Olesia nodded, hugging the child close. The next second, when Ahmed turned away to the counter, Christina pulled Olesia behind her. They ran. They shouted from behind. The brothers rushed after them, but the girls knew that if they reached the police, it would all be over. Christina ran faster than she had ever run in her life, overtaking passers-by and knocking over stalls. Olesia, with the baby, lagged behind, but Christina dragged her along. 1 block, then another. The door to the police station was open. They rushed inside, breathless and screaming. The police officers jumped up from their seats. Christina shouted one word in English, French, and gestures: "Help." The brothers stopped at the station entrance. They couldn't go in, couldn't take the girls away. Several local police officers surrounded them, asking questions. Christina collapsed on the floor, still unable to believe that they were free. Olesya held the crying baby close to her, repeating in Russian, "Thank God, thank God, thank God." At the station, they were questioned for 2 hours through an interpreter. Christina told everything: about Yusuf, about the village, about a year and a half of slavery, about Marina's death. She showed the scars on her arms and back, the marks of beatings. Olesya showed the child she had given birth to in captivity. The local police contacted Rabat. From there, orders were given to immediately provide the girls with protection and contact the Russian consulate. On the evening of December 22nd, the same day, consulate officials arrived in Azilal. A middle-aged diplomat who spoke Russian could not hold back his tears as he listened to their story. He promised that they would be returned home, that there would be an investigation, and that those responsible would be punished. But first, they had to retrieve Marina's body and organize a special operation in the village. On December 23, 2024, the Moroccan police, with the support of Russian diplomats, organized a raid on the village. A helicopter with officers landed on the outskirts. The locals scattered. The brothers were arrested without resistance. A search of the houses revealed the girls' passports, their phones, and personal belongings. In Mustafa's house, the police found records of other foreign tourists who had been bought in recent years. This was not an isolated case. Marina's body was never found. Mustafa indicated the approximate location in the mountains, but excavations were impossible during the winter. Her parents in Moscow had to declare their daughter dead without being able to give her a proper burial. This was yet another tragedy in this story. Christina and Olesya, with a baby in her arms, were sent to Rabat, where they underwent a medical examination. The results were terrible. Christina had lost 8 teeth due to vitamin deficiency and beatings. She had multiple rib fractures that had not healed properly, and chronic anemia. Olesya weighed 42 kilograms and was 168 centimeters tall. Her body was covered in scars. Both were in critical psychological condition, suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and suicidal thoughts. Yusuf, a 4-month-old boy, was examined separately. Physically, he was healthy, but the question of his future was acute. Under Moroccan law, a child born in the country to a Moroccan father is considered a Moroccan citizen. Despite his arrest, Omar demanded that his son be returned to him. The Russian consulate prepared documents to take the child out of the country as a Russian citizen through his mother, but the process was delayed. At the same time, a scandal was brewing in Russia. The media blew the story out of proportion, making it headline news. The parents of all 3 girls gave interviews, cried on camera, and demanded punishment. Social media was abuzz. Some accused the girls of naivety. Why did they go to an unfamiliar country for a cheap retreat? Others blamed the authorities. How could this have happened? Why didn't the consulate know about the missing citizens for a year and a half? Still others demanded tougher laws against human trafficking. But the worst began when the brothers were released on bail. On January 25, 2025, a month after their arrest, a local court in Azilal decided to release Ahmed, Omar, and Mustafa, pending trial on bail of 50,000 dirhams each. Their lawyers argued that the evidence was insufficient, that the words of foreign women could not be the sole basis for the charges, and that the local community confirmed the brothers' innocence. The Russian consulate was shocked. The diplomats demanded explanations and threatened an international scandal. The Moroccan side responded with vague statements about the independence of the judicial system. The brothers returned to the village as heroes. Local residents believed that the foreign women had slandered honest people. The Russian authorities realized that the case could be hushed up at the local level. Corruption, clan influence, lack of real leverage. They decided to act quickly. On January 30th, 2025, Christina and Olisa flew out of Rabat on a special flight with their baby. Without waiting for a trial, without hope for justice. They simply took their citizens home. At Sheremetyevo Airport, they were met by their parents, journalists, and cameras. Christina remained stoic, giving only brief comments. Olisa hid her face, clutching her child, born in such circumstances. Yusuf, a Moroccan baby with Russian blood, became a symbol of this tragedy. The girl spent the next few months in rehabilitation. Christina underwent several operations, had her teeth restored, and was treated for fractures. Psychologists worked with her daily, but the nightmares did not stop. She saw Ahmed, heard his voice, and woke up in a cold sweat. She could no longer work in her profession. The IT sphere seemed so distant and meaningless after what she had been through. It was even harder for Olesa. Her physical recovery was slow, but the main problem was psychological. She couldn't love her son. She looked at him and saw Omar. She heard his cries and remembered the violence. Her parents took care of their grandson, but Olesa distanced herself. Psychologists talked about postpartum depression exacerbated by trauma. They suggested giving the child up for adoption. Olesa couldn't make up her mind. The case in Morocco dragged on without progress. Lawyers hired by the Russian side tried to get a trial, but each hearing was postponed. The brothers are free and living normal lives. The village continues to exist. Other tourists disappear. According to international organizations fighting human trafficking, between 20 and 40 foreign tourists disappear in Morocco every year. Most of them are women who came for yoga retreats, language courses, or volunteer programs. The Atlas Spirit Journey Instagram profile has been deleted, but dozens of similar ones have appeared. The same beautiful photos, the same promises of authenticity, the same trusting girls in the comments. Youssef Al-Hakim, if that is his real name, has disappeared. Perhaps he is already organizing new retreats for new victims. Marina's parents are still waiting to be able to collect their daughter's body. The Moroccan authorities promise to resume the search in the spring of 2025, when the snow melts in the mountains. But there is little hope. Most likely her remains will remain in an unmarked grave somewhere in the Atlas Mountains. The story of 3 Moscow friends has become a warning to thousands of young women around the world. But it has also exposed a systemic problem. Human trafficking in the tourism industry thrives precisely because the victims are trusting and the criminals are professional. A beautiful picture on social media, a few rave reviews, a plausible story, and the trap snaps shut. Today, Christina lives with her parents in Moscow, does not work, and is undergoing therapy. She has created a Telegram channel where she talks about her experience and warns others about the risks of unsafe travel. She has several thousand subscribers, but each video is a huge struggle for her. Olesa moved to a small town in the Moscow region, far from the hustle and bustle of the capital. Yusuf is now 1 year and 2 months old. She still cannot call herself his mother, even though she takes care of him. Her parents hope that time will heal the wounds and that her maternal love will awaken. Psychologists are less optimistic. Trauma of this magnitude may never heal. The case officially remains open in both countries. In Russia, a criminal case has been opened on charges of human trafficking, kidnapping, and unlawful deprivation of liberty. In Morocco, it is being investigated under articles on the abduction of foreign citizens and human trafficking. But without a real desire on the part of Morocco to see the case through to the end, and without international pressure, the chances of justice are close to zero. The question remains, how many more girls will disappear before the authorities of both countries take this problem seriously? How many more families will wait for their daughters, not knowing if they are alive? How many children will be born into slavery, with no future, no hope? This story does not have a happy ending. Marina is dead, buried in an unknown grave. Christina is broken, living with nightmares. Olesia cannot love her own child. The criminals are free, preparing for new deals. The system continues to operate, grinding down the lives of naive tourists thirsting for adventure and spiritual enlightenment. The only thing that can be done is to tell this story, share it, warn others. Do not trust unfamiliar tour operators. Double-check everything. Don't hand over your passport. Always have a backup communication plan. Travel in groups. Register with the consulate before your trip. This does not guarantee safety, but it reduces the risks. Meanwhile, somewhere on Instagram, a new account appears with beautiful photos of the Moroccan mountains and promises of an unforgettable spiritual experience. Someone leaves a comment asking about the price. Someone transfers the prepayment. The cycle repeats. If you know someone who is planning a trip to an exotic country through unverified organizers, show them this story. If you yourself dream of adventure, be careful. Check the information, and don't risk your life for the sake of a beautiful picture. And if you know of cases of human trafficking or missing tourists, report them to law enforcement agencies, consulates, and international organizations. Silence kills. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories about how thin the line between dream and nightmare can be. And in the comments, write, what do you think could have prevented this tragedy? What signs of fraud could the girls have noticed in advance? Let's discuss it so that this doesn't happen again.